In the sprawling suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, where modern mansions with manicured lawns stand as monuments to American prosperity and where the pursuit of wealth often overshadows family bonds, lived a story that would challenge everything people believed about success, family loyalty, and the true meaning of happiness. A story that began with the heartbreaking abandonment of an elderly mother by the son she had sacrificed everything to raise. Subscribe to the channel to help me reach 1,000 subscribers and bring you even better stories. The story centered around Beatrice Thompson, a 79-year-old woman who had spent her entire life working multiple jobs to provide for her family. A woman of remarkable strength and dignity who had weathered decades of financial hardship, personal loss, and social challenges with grace and determination that had inspired everyone who had known her during her younger years. Beatrice had been born in rural Alabama during the Great Depression, the daughter of sharecroppers who had taught her the values of hard work, honesty, and perseverance that had sustained her through a lifetime of struggles and triumphs that had shaped her into a woman of unshakable character and deep faith. At the age of 18, she had married Thomas Thompson, a kind and hard-working man who had shared her dreams of building a better life for their future children. And together they had moved to Atlanta in search of opportunities that had been scarce in the rural South during the 1960s. Thomas had found work in a factory, while Beatrice had taken jobs as a housekeeper, seamstress, and babysitter, often working 12-hour days to supplement their modest income and save money for their children's education and their family's future. Their son, Marcus Thompson, had been born in 1970, and from the moment of his birth, Beatrice had been determined to give him every opportunity she had never had, working extra shifts, taking on additional jobs, and sacrificing her own comfort to ensure that Marcus could attend good schools and have access to the resources he needed to succeed. "That boy is going to have a better life than we ever did," Beatrice had often told Thomas, as they had counted their savings by candlelight, planning for Marcus's future with the dedication of parents who understood that education was the key to breaking the cycle of poverty. When Marcus had been 8 years old, Thomas had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving Beatrice to raise their son alone on her limited income, a challenge that had seemed insurmountable, but that she had faced with the determination of a mother who would not let circumstances defeat her dreams for her child. "Mama, why do you work so much?" Young Marcus had asked during one of the rare evenings when Beatrice had been home before his bedtime. "Because I want you to have opportunities I never had, baby," she had replied while helping him with his homework at their small kitchen table. "Education is going to be your ticket to a better life." Beatrice had worked as a cleaning lady in office buildings during the night, a seamstress during the day, and had taken in laundry on weekends, often sleeping only 4 to 5 hours per night to maintain the multiple income streams necessary to pay for Marcus's private school tuition, books, clothes, and extracurricular activities. Despite their financial struggles, Beatrice had made sure that Marcus had never felt deprived of love, attention, or encouragement, attending every school event, helping with homework, and instilling in him the values of respect, gratitude, and responsibility that she believed were essential for success. "Marcus, remember that everything you achieve in life is built on the sacrifices of those who came before you," she had often reminded him. "Never forget where you came from or the people who helped you get where you're going." Marcus had been an intelligent and ambitious student who had excelled academically and had earned a full scholarship to Georgia Tech, where he had studied business and engineering with the focus and determination that his mother's sacrifices had inspired. During his college years, Beatrice had continued working multiple jobs to support herself and to send Marcus spending money, care packages, and emotional support, even though her own health had begun to decline due to decades of exhausting work and stress. After graduation, Marcus had quickly found success in the technology industry, starting with an entry-level position at a software company and rapidly advancing through promotions and job changes that had increased his salary and status with remarkable speed. "Mama, I got another promotion," Marcus had called to tell Beatrice during his third year out of college. "I'm making more money than I ever imagined possible." "I'm so proud of you, baby," Beatrice had replied with tears of joy. "All those years of hard work were worth it to see you succeed." Indeed, but as Marcus's wealth and status had grown, his connection to his mother and his appreciation for her sacrifices had gradually diminished, replaced by an obsession with material success and social status that had slowly eroded the values Beatrice had worked so hard to instill. By the time Marcus had reached 35, he had become a multi-millionaire through a combination of successful investments, real estate ventures, and a technology startup that had been acquired by a major corporation for an enormous profit. He had married Victoria, a sophisticated woman from a wealthy family who had never known financial hardship and who had viewed Beatrice as an embarrassing reminder of Marcus's humble origins. "Marcus, your mother is sweet, but she doesn't really fit in with our social circle," Victoria had often commented. "Maybe it would be better if she didn't come to our dinner parties and events." Marcus had gradually distanced himself from Beatrice, reducing his visits from weekly to monthly, then to holidays only, and finally to brief, obligatory phone calls that had left Beatrice feeling increasingly isolated and forgotten. "Marcus, I miss seeing you," Beatrice had said during one of their infrequent conversations. "It's been 3 months since your last visit." "Mum, I'm very busy with work and social obligations," Marcus had replied, with the impatience of someone who viewed family relationships as inconvenient interruptions to his important life. "You understand how demanding my career is." As Beatrice had aged and her health had declined, she had begun to need more assistance with daily activities, but Marcus had been reluctant to provide the time and attention she had needed. "Marcus, the doctor says I need help with grocery shopping and housework," Beatrice had explained during a phone call. "Could you maybe hire someone to help me, or could you visit more often?" "Mom, hiring help is expensive, and I don't have time to visit more frequently," Marcus had responded. "Maybe you should consider moving to a nursing home where you can get professional care." The suggestion had broken Beatrice's heart, not because she had been opposed to assisted living, but because it had revealed how little Marcus had understood about her desire to maintain her independence and dignity in her own home. "Marcus, I don't want to live in a nursing home," she had pleaded. "This house has been my home for 40 years. It's where I raised you, where your father and I built our life together." "Mom, you're being sentimental and impractical," Marcus had replied with the cold logic of someone who had lost touch with emotional connections. "You can't live alone anymore, and I can't be responsible for taking care of you." The conversation had ended with Beatrice realizing that her son had become someone she barely recognized, a wealthy man who had forgotten the values and sacrifices that had made his success possible. 6 months later, Marcus had made a decision that had shocked even Victoria with its callousness. "I've found a solution for my mother's situation," he had announced during dinner at their mansion. "I'm moving her to a small house in rural Georgia where she can live quietly without being a burden on our lives." "What kind of house?" Victoria had asked. "It's a modest place, but it has everything she needs. It's isolated so she won't bother anyone, and it's cheap to maintain." But what Marcus had not told Victoria was that the modest place was actually a rundown shack on 5 acres of undeveloped land, 60 miles from Atlanta, with minimal electricity, no air conditioning, and plumbing that barely functioned. When Marcus had driven Beatrice to see the property, she had been horrified by what she had found. "Marcus, this isn't a house, it's a shack," she had said, while looking at the dilapidated structure with its sagging roof, broken windows, and overgrown yard. "You can't seriously expect me to live here." "Mom, it's what I can afford for you right now," Marcus had lied, knowing that he could easily have provided her with a comfortable home, but choosing not to spend the money. It's temporary until I can find something better. Marcus, there's no air conditioning, the plumbing doesn't work properly, and the roof leaks. Beatrice had protested. How am I supposed to live in these conditions? Mum, you'll adjust. You've always been resourceful. And with those heartless words, Marcus had abandoned his 79-year-old mother in a shack that was barely habitable, leaving her with minimal supplies and a promise to check on her soon that they both had known was a lie. As Marcus had driven away in his luxury car, Beatrice had stood in the doorway of the shack, watching her son disappear and wondering how the baby she had sacrificed everything to raise had become a man capable of such cruelty. But what Marcus had not known was that his mother possessed a strength, wisdom, and resourcefulness that 79 years of life had developed, and that his abandonment would awaken a determination that would soon teach him lessons about family, gratitude, and the true meaning of success that his wealth had never provided. The discovery and the hidden strength. 3 weeks into her exile in the dilapidated shack, Beatrice had begun to understand the full extent of her son's betrayal and the desperate nature of her situation. The living conditions had been even worse than they had initially appeared, with a roof that had leaked during every rainstorm, plumbing that had provided only intermittent water, and electrical wiring that had been so old and dangerous that she had been afraid to use most of the outlets. Lord, give me strength, Beatrice had prayed each morning as she had awakened to new challenges. Mice in the kitchen, dampness that had made her arthritis worse, and isolation that had been more complete than anything she had ever experienced. The nearest neighbor had been 2 miles away, and Marcus had left her without a car, promising to arrange transportation when she had needed it, another promise that had proven to be empty. But rather than succumbing to despair, Beatrice had begun to draw upon reserves of strength and ingenuity that decades of overcoming challenges had developed. I survived the depression, raised a child alone, and worked 3 jobs for 30 years, she had reminded herself. I'm not going to let this defeat me. Her first priority had been making the shack livable, and she had begun with the resources she had available. Using skills she had learned during her childhood in rural Alabama, Beatrice had started repairing what she could with materials she had found around the property, old boards, discarded tools, and supplies that had been left by previous occupants. Daddy taught me how to fix things with whatever was available, she had murmured, while patching holes in the roof with pieces of metal and tar she had discovered in a shed. Those lessons are going to save my life now. She had cleaned the shack thoroughly, organized the limited space efficiently, and had begun growing vegetables in a small garden using seeds she had found and techniques she had remembered from her childhood. If Marcus thinks he can break my spirit by putting me in this place, he's got another thing coming, she had said, while planting tomatoes and beans in the yard. I'm going to make this work. But Beatrice's most important discovery had been that she was not as isolated as Marcus had intended. During her second week in the shack, she had been working in her garden when she had noticed an elderly man walking along the dirt road that passed by the property. "Good morning," the man had called out. "I'm Henry Walker. I live about a mile down the road. Saw you moving in and thought I'd introduce myself. I'm Beatrice Thompson," she had replied, grateful for human contact. "It's nice to meet a neighbor." Henry had been a 73-year-old retired farmer who had lived in the area for decades and who had immediately recognized that Beatrice was in a difficult situation. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what brings you to this old place?" "It's been empty for years." Beatrice had hesitated, embarrassed to admit that her own son had abandoned her there, but Henry's kind demeanor had encouraged her to tell the truth. "My son thought this would be a good place for me to live," she had said carefully. Henry had looked at the shack and had understood immediately that something was wrong with the situation. "Mrs. Thompson, this place isn't fit for anyone to live in. Do you have family who can help you find something better?" "My son is busy with his own life," Beatrice had replied, not wanting to speak badly of Marcus despite his treatment of her. Henry had recognized the pain in her voice and had made a decision that would change both of their lives. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to help you make this place livable, and I'm going to introduce you to some other folks in the area who can lend a hand." Over the following days, Henry had brought other neighbors to meet Beatrice. Martha Jenkins, a 68-year-old widow who had lived alone on a small farm. Robert Chen, a 45-year-old mechanic who had moved to the area for the peace and quiet. And Susan Davis, a 52-year-old teacher who had recently retired and had been looking for ways to help her community. "Beatrice, we're going to form a little support network," Martha had announced during their first group meeting. "Nobody should have to live in these conditions alone." The neighbors had organized work parties to repair the shack, with Robert fixing the plumbing and electrical problems, Henry and Martha helping with structural repairs, and Susan organizing supplies and coordinating efforts. "I haven't seen community spirit like this in years," Robert had observed, while installing a new water heater that the group had purchased together. "It's like the old days when neighbors actually took care of each other." But the most significant discovery had been that Beatrice possessed skills and knowledge that were valuable to her new community. "Beatrice, you know more about gardening and preserving food than anyone I've ever met," Martha had observed while learning Beatrice's techniques for canning vegetables. "Where did you learn all this?" "Growing up during the Depression, you learned to make the most of everything," Beatrice had explained. "My mother taught me how to grow food, preserve it, and make it last through hard times." Beatrice had begun teaching her neighbors traditional skills that had been nearly lost. How to grow vegetables in poor soil, how to preserve food without expensive equipment, how to make household items from available materials, and how to create beauty and comfort with limited resources. "Beatrice is like a living library of practical knowledge," Susan had commented. "She knows things that people used to know, but that have been forgotten in our modern world." As word had spread about Beatrice's knowledge and the community that had formed around her, other people had begun visiting the shack to learn from her. "Mrs. Thompson, could you teach my daughter how to sew?" had asked a young mother from a nearby town. "She wants to learn traditional skills, but I don't know how to teach her." "Of course, dear," Beatrice had replied. "Bring her by on Saturday and we'll start with the basics." Within 2 months, Beatrice had been teaching regular classes in her small garden and the improved shack. Gardening, sewing, cooking, food preservation, and traditional crafts that had attracted students from across the region. "I never expected to become a teacher at 79, Beatrice had told Henry during one of their evening conversations. "But sharing what I know gives me more purpose than I've had in years." The classes had grown into an informal school that had attracted attention from local media and educational organizations. "What Beatrice Thompson is doing is preserving traditional knowledge that's in danger of being lost," had observed a professor from the University of Georgia who had visited the shack. "Her teachings represent a valuable cultural resource." But perhaps most importantly, Beatrice had discovered that her exile had given her something she hadn't had in years, a sense of purpose, community, and genuine appreciation from people who valued her knowledge and experience. "For the first time in decades, I feel like people actually need me," she had reflected. "Not for my money or what I can do for them, but for who I am and what I know." Meanwhile, Marcus had continued his life in Atlanta, occasionally remembering to call his mother, but never visiting and never asking detailed questions about her living conditions. "How are you doing, Mom?" he had asked during one of his brief, obligatory phone calls. "I'm doing well, Marcus," Beatrice had replied, not wanting to give him the satisfaction of knowing how difficult the situation had been initially. "I'm keeping busy." "Good. I'm glad you're adjusting." What Marcus had not known was that his mother was not just adjusting. She was thriving in ways that his wealth and status had never allowed him to experience. And as Beatrice's reputation as a teacher and community leader had grown, she had begun to develop a plan that would teach Marcus lessons about family, respect, and the true meaning of success that would challenge everything he believed about his own life. The revelation and the unexpected success. 6 months after Marcus had abandoned his mother in the rural shack, Beatrice's informal school had evolved into something extraordinary that had attracted attention far beyond the local community. What had started as simple lessons in gardening and traditional crafts had grown into the Heritage Skills Institute, a recognized educational program that had been drawing students, researchers and visitors from across the Southeast. Mrs. Thompson, we have a waiting list of over 200 people who want to attend your workshops, Susan had reported during one of their weekly planning meetings. Universities are sending graduate students to study your teaching methods, and we've had inquiries from as far away as California. The transformation of the property had been remarkable, with the community's efforts having converted the dilapidated shack into a charming cottage surrounded by demonstration gardens, workshop spaces, and outdoor classrooms that had showcased traditional building techniques and sustainable living practices. "This place looks like something from a magazine," Martha had observed, while admiring the herb garden that had been designed using Beatrice's knowledge of companion planting and natural pest control. Who would have thought that old shack could become something so beautiful? Beatrice had been featured in newspaper articles, television programs, and academic journals as an expert in traditional American skills and sustainable living practices. Beatrice Thompson represents a living connection to America's agricultural and domestic heritage, had written a journalist from Southern Living magazine. Her knowledge encompasses skills that sustained families for generations, but that have been largely forgotten in our modern consumer culture. The financial success of the Heritage Skills Institute had been unexpected but substantial, with workshop fees, consulting contracts, and sales of traditional crafts and preserved foods generating significant income that had been shared among Beatrice and her community partners. Beatrice, the Institute generated over $150,000 in revenue last quarter, Henry had reported with amazement. You've created a sustainable business that's preserving traditional knowledge while providing income for everyone involved. But more important than the financial success had been the personal transformation that Beatrice had experienced. "I haven't felt this alive and purposeful in decades," she had confided to Martha during one of their evening conversations. "Marcus thought he was punishing me by putting me here, but he actually gave me the greatest gift of my life." "What do you mean?" "He gave me the opportunity to discover who I really am when I'm not defined by being someone's mother or someone's employee. For the first time in my life, I'm valued for my own knowledge and abilities." The Heritage Skills Institute had also attracted the attention of government agencies and non-profit organizations interested in preserving traditional knowledge and promoting sustainable living practices. "The work that Mrs. Thompson is doing aligns perfectly with our mission to preserve American cultural heritage," had declared a representative from the National Endowment for the Arts who had visited the Institute. "We are prepared to offer significant grant funding to expand her programs." Meanwhile, Marcus had remained completely unaware of his mother's success, continuing his life in Atlanta without visiting or showing genuine interest in her situation. During their infrequent phone calls, Beatrice had mentioned her teaching activities, but had not elaborated on the scope or success of what she had built. "I'm teaching some classes in traditional skills," she had told Marcus during one conversation. "That's nice, Mom. I'm glad you're keeping busy," he had replied dismissively, not bothering to ask for details about her activities. The revelation of Beatrice's success had come when Victoria had been browsing social media and had encountered a viral video about the Heritage Skills Institute. "Marcus, you need to see this," Victoria had called from her office in their mansion. "There's a video about some woman in rural Georgia who's become famous for teaching traditional skills." Marcus had looked at the video with growing shock as he had recognized his mother teaching a group of young people how to preserve vegetables using techniques she had learned during the Depression. That's my mother," he had said with disbelief. "Your mother, the one you said was living quietly in the country." Marcus had watched in amazement as the video had shown the beautiful property, the thriving gardens, and the obvious respect and admiration that students and visitors had shown for Beatrice. The Heritage Skills Institute has become a model for sustainable education and community development, the narrator had explained. Beatrice Thompson, the Institute's founder, has created a program that preserves traditional knowledge while generating economic opportunities for rural communities. Victoria had looked at Marcus with a mixture of surprise and accusation. "Marcus, you told me your mother was living in a simple house in the country. You never mentioned that she had become some kind of famous teacher." I didn't know," Marcus had admitted, feeling confused and somewhat threatened by his mother's unexpected success. Over the following days, Marcus had researched his mother's activities online, discovering articles, videos, and social media posts that had revealed the full extent of what she had accomplished. Beatrice Thompson, the 79-year-old teacher who's preserving America's heritage, had read one headline. "From poverty to purpose. How one woman's traditional knowledge created a movement," had declared another. Marcus had been particularly struck by an interview in which Beatrice had been asked about her motivation for starting the institute. "I spent my whole life working to provide opportunities for my son," she had said. "When he no longer needed me, I discovered that I had knowledge and skills that other people valued. Starting this institute has given me more satisfaction and purpose than anything I've ever done." The interviewer had asked about her family's support for her work. "My son is very busy with his own successful career," Beatrice had replied diplomatically. "I'm proud of what he's accomplished, and I hope he's proud of what I'm accomplishing now." Marcus had felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in his mother's success, embarrassment about his neglect of her, and confusion about how the woman he had viewed as a burden had become someone celebrated and respected. "I need to visit her," he had told Victoria. "I need to see what she's built." "Marcus, maybe you should call first. It sounds like she's very busy with important work." But Marcus had decided that a surprise visit would be better, not wanting to give Beatrice the opportunity to refuse to see him. The next weekend, he had driven to the rural property, expecting to find the isolated shack where he had left his mother 6 months earlier. Instead, he had found a thriving educational center with multiple buildings, beautiful gardens, and dozens of people participating in workshops and activities. "Excuse me," he had asked a young woman who had been working in one of the gardens. "I'm looking for Beatrice Thompson." "Oh, you mean Mrs. B. She's teaching a workshop on traditional cooking techniques in the main classroom. Are you here for the weekend intensive program?" Marcus had followed the directions to a converted barn, where he had found his mother leading a group of 20 students through the process of making bread in a traditional wood-fired oven. "The key to good bread is understanding how your ingredients work together," Beatrice had been explaining with confidence and authority that Marcus had never seen in her before. "Flour, water, yeast, and salt. Simple ingredients that create something wonderful when you understand the process." Marcus had watched from the back of the room as students had hung on his mother's every word, taking notes and asking questions that she had answered with expertise and patience. When the workshop had ended, Beatrice had noticed Marcus standing near the door. "Marcus," she had said with surprise, but not displeasure, "what brings you here?" And with that simple question, a conversation had begun that would force Marcus to confront the truth about his treatment of his mother and the lessons she had learned about finding purpose and respect in unexpected places. The confrontation and the life-changing lesson. Marcus had stood in the doorway of the converted barn, watching as students had approached his mother with genuine gratitude and respect, thanking her for the lesson and asking questions about future workshops. "Mrs. Thompson, that was incredible," a young man had said. "I've never understood bread making before, but the way you explained it made everything clear." "Thank you, dear," Beatrice had replied with a warmth and confidence that Marcus had rarely seen during his childhood. "Remember, practice makes perfect. Don't be discouraged if your first few loaves aren't exactly what you want." After the last student had left, Beatrice had turned to face her son directly. "Marcus, I'm surprised to see you here. You've never shown interest in visiting me before." "Mum, I saw some videos online about what you're doing here. I had no idea you had built all this." Beatrice had studied her son's face, seeing confusion, surprise, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. "Would you like me to show you around?" As they had walked through the property, Marcus had been amazed by the transformation of what he had remembered as a run-down shack and overgrown land. The main cottage had been beautifully renovated with traditional techniques, surrounded by demonstration gardens that had showcased sustainable farming methods, heritage vegetables, and medicinal plants. "Mom, this place is incredible. How did you manage to do all this?" "I had help from wonderful neighbors who became friends and partners," Beatrice had explained. "When people work together toward a common goal, amazing things can happen." They had visited the workshop spaces where traditional crafts were taught, the outdoor kitchen where food preservation classes were held, and the library that had housed Beatrice's collection of books on traditional skills and sustainable living. "Mrs. Thompson, there you are," Henry had called as he had approached them. "The reporter from National Geographic is here for the interview." "National Geographic?" Marcus had asked with astonishment. "They're doing a feature story on the Heritage Skills Institute," Beatrice had explained. "Apparently what we're doing here is considered newsworthy." Marcus had watched as his mother had conducted a professional interview with a journalist from one of the world's most prestigious magazines, discussing the importance of preserving traditional knowledge and the success of her educational programs. "Mrs. Thompson, your institute has become a model for sustainable education," the journalist had observed. "What advice would you give to other communities interested in preserving traditional skills?" "Start with what you know and what your community needs," Beatrice had replied with authority. "Traditional knowledge exists everywhere, but it's often undervalued. When you create opportunities for people to share and learn from each other, you build something much more valuable than money." After the interview, Marcus had asked to speak with his mother privately. "Mom, can we talk? I need to understand what happened here." They had sat on the porch of the cottage, looking out over the gardens where several students had been practicing techniques they had learned in earlier workshops. "Marcus, what do you want to know?" "I want to know how you went from living in that old shack to, did this, and I want to know why you never told me what you were building." Beatrice had considered her response carefully. "Marcus, when you brought me here 6 months ago, you made it clear that you saw me as a burden. You put me in a place you thought would keep me out of your way." "Mom, I was trying to find you a place where you could live independently." "Marcus, please don't lie to me. We both know that shack was barely habitable. You put me here because you wanted me to disappear from your life." Marcus had felt shame wash over him as he had been forced to confront the truth about his motivations. "You're right. I was selfish and cruel. I was so focused on my own life that I forgot about everything you had done for me." "Marcus, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I want you to understand what I learned here." "What did you learn?" "I learned that I had spent so much of my life defining myself through other people, as your father's wife, as your mother, as someone's employee, that I had forgotten who I was as an individual." Beatrice had gestured toward the thriving institute around them. "When you left me here, I was forced to discover what I could do on my own. And what I discovered was that I had knowledge, skills, and abilities that people valued." "But Mom, you always had those skills. Why didn't you use them before?" "Because I was so busy taking care of everyone else that I never had the opportunity to focus on what I wanted to do. And because I had been taught that my role was to support other people's dreams, not to pursue my own." Marcus had begun to understand the magnitude of what his abandonment had unintentionally created. "So when I left you here, You gave me the greatest gift of my life. Even though that wasn't your intention, you gave me the opportunity to discover my own worth and to build something meaningful with my own hands and knowledge. Marcus had looked around at the institute with new eyes. Mom, I'm amazed by what you've built, but I'm ashamed of how I treated you. I abandoned you when you needed me most. Marcus, I'm not angry with you anymore. What you did was wrong, but it led to something wonderful that I never would have discovered otherwise. Can you forgive me? I can forgive you. But more importantly, I hope you can learn from this experience. What do you want me to learn? Beatrice had stood up and had walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over the gardens, where people of all ages had been learning skills that connected them to their heritage. I want you to learn that success isn't just about accumulating wealth or status. Real success is about using your abilities to create something meaningful that benefits others. I thought I was successful. I have money, a big house, a prestigious career. And are you happy, Marcus? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you have genuine relationships with people who value you for who you are rather than what you can do for them? Marcus had considered the question honestly. No, I'm not happy. I have everything I thought I wanted, but I feel empty most of the time. That's because you've been chasing external validation instead of internal purpose. You've been trying to prove your worth through what you own rather than through what you contribute. Beatrice had turned back to face her son. Marcus, I want you to understand that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. Community, purpose, respect earned through service, the satisfaction of teaching someone something useful, these things are worth more than any amount of money. But Mom, I've worked so hard to build my career and my wealth, and I'm proud of your success. But I want you to think about how you can use that success to create something meaningful, something that will matter long after you're gone. Over the following hours, Marcus had met the people who had become part of his mother's community. Henry, Martha, Robert, Susan, and dozens of students and visitors who had spoken about Beatrice with genuine affection and respect. Your mother saved my marriage, one woman had told Marcus. She taught me traditional cooking skills that brought my family back to the dinner table and helped us reconnect with each other. Mrs. Thompson taught me how to grow my own food, a young father had shared. Now my children understand where food comes from, and we've saved thousands of dollars on groceries. She's like a grandmother to all of us, a college student had observed. She teaches us skills our own grandparents never had the chance to pass down. As the day had progressed, Marcus had begun to understand that his mother had created something far more valuable than anything he had achieved in his business career. Mom, what you've built here is incredible. You've created a community, preserved important knowledge, and given people skills they can use for the rest of their lives. Thank you, Marcus. But more importantly, I've found purpose and happiness that I never had when I was just working to support other people's dreams. That evening, as they had sat together watching the sunset over the gardens, Marcus had made a decision that would change the direction of his life. Mom, I want to help you expand this institute. I want to use my resources to support what you're building here. Marcus, I appreciate the offer, but I need to know that you understand what this place represents. What do you mean? This institute isn't about money or prestige. It's about service, community, and preserving knowledge that benefits everyone. If you want to be part of it, you need to be committed to those values. Marcus had looked at his mother with new respect and understanding. Mom, I want to learn from you. I want to understand what real success looks like. And with those words, Marcus had begun a journey of personal transformation that would teach him lessons about family, purpose, and the true meaning of wealth that his business education had never provided. 6 months later, Marcus had sold his mansion in Atlanta and had moved to a modest house near the Heritage Skills Institute, where he had begun using his business skills to help expand the programs while learning traditional skills from his mother and the community she had built. I've never been happier, he had told Victoria during one of their conversations. I finally understand what my mother was trying to teach me all those years. The Heritage Skills Institute had grown into a nationally recognized center for traditional education. But more importantly, it had become a testament to the power of finding purpose through service and the value of knowledge that connects people to their heritage. My son thought he was punishing me by leaving me in that old shack, Beatrice had reflected during a television interview. But he actually gave me the opportunity to discover who I really was and what I was capable of achieving. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things we ever do. And Bevians in rural Georgia, where a son's cruelty had unintentionally created his mother's greatest triumph, the Heritage Skills Institute had flourished as proof that true success comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we contribute, and that it's never too late to discover our purpose and build something meaningful that will benefit generations to come. And that's the end of our incredible story. If you like this powerful story about the millionaire son who left his 79-year-old mom in a shack, but she taught him an unexpected lesson, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will move you and make you reflect on the most important values in life. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching us from in the United States or anywhere in the world? What do you think about Marcus's decision to abandon his mother in such terrible conditions? Do you believe Beatrice was right to forgive her son after what he did to her? Have you ever seen situations where elderly parents are neglected by their successful children? What would you do if you discovered a family member was treating an elderly relative this way? Do you think Marcus's transformation was genuine or just convenient? Do you know stories of elderly people who found new purpose later in life? What do you think about Beatrice's philosophy that real success comes from service rather than wealth? Do you believe that sometimes bad experiences can lead to good outcomes? We love knowing that we have followers in every corner of the country who value the importance of respecting our elders, finding purpose through service, and understanding that true wealth comes from the relationships we build and the knowledge we share. Until the next story that will inspire you and make you reflect on what really matters in life and how we should treat the people who sacrificed for us. 2 years after Marcus had moved to rural Georgia to work alongside his mother, the Heritage Skills Institute had evolved into something even more extraordinary than anyone had imagined possible. The institute had expanded to include satellite programs in 12 states, with Beatrice serving as the founding director emeritus and Marcus using his business expertise to manage the organization's growth, while continuing to learn traditional skills from his mother and the community she had built. Marcus has become one of our most dedicated students, Henry had observed during a community meeting. Watching him learn to build furniture with hand tools and grow vegetables using traditional methods has been remarkable. He's discovered skills he never knew he had. The transformation in Marcus had been profound and genuine, extending far beyond his professional involvement with the Institute to encompass a complete re-evaluation of his values and priorities. I used to measure success by my bank account and my possessions, Marcus had reflected during a documentary about the Institute. Now I measure it by the skills I've learned, the relationships I've built, and the knowledge I can pass on to others. Victoria had initially been skeptical of Marcus's decision to abandon their wealthy lifestyle, but she had eventually visited the Institute and had been impressed by the community and purpose she had found there. I thought Marcus had lost his mind when he sold our mansion, Victoria had admitted during an interview, but when I saw what he and Beatrice had built here, I realized he had found something much more valuable than anything money could buy. Victoria had eventually joined the Institute as well, using her background in marketing and public relations to help promote traditional skills, education, and sustainable living practices to wider audiences. Working here has given me a sense of purpose I never had when I was just attending charity galas and social events, Victoria had explained. Teaching young people about sustainable living and traditional crafts is more fulfilling than anything I did in my previous life. The Institute had attracted international attention, with delegations from countries around the world visiting to study Beatrice's methods for preserving traditional knowledge and creating sustainable communities. What Mrs. Thompson has created here represents a model for cultural preservation that could be adapted in communities worldwide, had observed a representative from UNESCO who had visited the Institute. Her approach to intergenerational knowledge transfer is revolutionary. Beatrice, now 81, had continued to teach and lead with energy and wisdom that had inspired everyone around her. Age is just a number, she had often told her students. As long as you have knowledge to share and the willingness to learn new things, you can continue growing and contributing. The Institute had also become a center for research into traditional American skills, with universities sending graduate students to document and study the techniques that Beatrice and her community had preserved. Beatrice Thompson has become a living repository of American cultural heritage, had written a researcher from the Smithsonian Institution. Her knowledge encompasses skills that sustained American families for generations, but that were nearly lost in our rush toward modernization. Marcus had established a scholarship program that had provided opportunities for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to attend the Institute's programs, ensuring that traditional knowledge would be passed on to diverse communities. Education should be accessible to everyone, regardless of their economic background, Marcus had declared during the scholarship program's launch. My mother taught me that knowledge is most valuable when it's shared. The success of the Heritage Skills Institute had inspired similar programs across the country, creating a movement that had revitalized interest in traditional skills and sustainable living practices. The Institute has sparked a renaissance in traditional American crafts and skills, had reported a journalist from National Public Radio. Communities across the country are establishing their own programs based on Beatrice Thompson's model. 5 years after his initial visit to the Institute, Marcus had been invited to speak at business schools about his transformation from wealth-focused executive to community-centered educator. I used to think that success meant accumulating as much wealth as possible, he had told students at Harvard Business School. But I learned from my mother that true success means using your abilities to create something that benefits others and that will outlast your own lifetime. The most valuable lesson my mother taught me wasn't about traditional skills or sustainable living. It was about finding purpose through service and understanding that our worth isn't measured by what we own, but by what we contribute. Beatrice had been honored with numerous awards for her contributions to education and cultural preservation, but she had remained focused on the daily work of teaching and community building. Awards are nice, she had said during one ceremony, but the real reward is seeing a young person master a skill that will serve them for life, or watching a community come together to preserve knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The relationship between Beatrice and Marcus had evolved into a true partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. My son and I have both learned that it's never too late to change direction and find new purpose, Beatrice had observed during a television interview. He thought he was successful when he had money and status, but he's truly successful now that he's using his abilities to serve others. And I learned that the woman I had dismissed as a burden was actually one of the wisest and most capable people I've ever known. My mother taught me that real wealth comes from knowledge, community, and the ability to make a positive difference in other people's lives. In rural Georgia, where a son's abandonment had accidentally created his mother's greatest triumph, the Heritage Skills Institute had flourished as a testament to the power of resilience, the value of traditional knowledge, and the truth that it's never too late to discover our purpose and build something meaningful that will benefit generations to come. The story of Beatrice Thompson had become an inspiration to people worldwide, proving that age, circumstances, And even betrayal by loved ones could not diminish the human capacity for growth, contribution, and the creation of lasting positive change. And that's the complete end of our incredible story. If you liked this powerful story about the millionaire son who left his 79-year-old mom in a shack, but she taught him an unexpected lesson, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will move you and make you reflect on the most important values in life. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching us from in the United States or anywhere in the world? What do you think about how Beatrice turned her abandonment into her greatest opportunity? Do you believe that Marcus's transformation was complete and genuine? Have you ever seen elderly people who found new purpose and success later in life? What would you do if you had the chance to learn traditional skills from someone like Beatrice? Do you think modern society has lost valuable knowledge by abandoning traditional skills? Do you know examples of people who changed their definition of success from wealth to service? What do you think about the idea that our worst experiences can sometimes lead to our greatest achievements? Do you believe that family relationships can be healed even after serious betrayals? What traditional skills do you think are most important to preserve for future generations? We love knowing that we have followers in every corner of the country who value the importance of respecting our elders, preserving traditional knowledge, and understanding that true success comes from the positive impact we make on others. Until the next story that will inspire you and make you reflect on what really matters in life and how we can find purpose and meaning at any age.